From our studios around the world, this is Eat Well, Travel Better, the Business of Food Travel podcast. Every month, we bring you the world's culinary tourism industry professionals and share with you strategies, tactics, and information that help make you a more effective leader, communicator, and professional in our culinary tourism industry. I'm your host, Eric Wolf. Thanks for listening. Welcome to episode 52. Today we will be speaking with Brighde Reed. Brighde is the co-founder of World Vegan Travel, a tour company that brings groups of vegans on luxury getaways around the world. A vegan of 14 years and travel addict, she loves to wow her travelers on her trips with local vegan-made specialties like Fleischnacke in Alsace and cow soy in northern Thailand. Brighde, welcome to the Business of Food Travel podcast. I'm excited to be speaking with you today.
Thank you so much for having me, Eric. I'm excited to be here.
So tell me, you said that you've been vegan for 14 years and it was the best decision you ever made. Why is that?
Well, you're right. It was 14 years ago that we became vegan, and the information that I was presented with that inspired me to go vegan was, very, very upsetting in many ways when I realized the impact that the meat and dairy and egg industry was having on people. But it just really felt amazing to be able to live according to my values of compassion and nonviolence. So, I've always been somebody that was quite sort of peace-loving. I majored in peace studies at university, and, I've always had this kind of idea and belief that we should be kind to other people, other living beings. And then when I became vegan, I was sort of more aligning to those values. And this really created quite a lightness of being that really continues to this day. And not only do I have these amazing feelings inside myself as well, it's also helped me to align my career with my lifestyle by offering vegan tours. It's helped me meet incredible people and have incredible purpose in my life, where beforehand that may have been lacking.
So you majored in peace studies. That's really interesting. Are you aware of the gastrodiplomacy segment of our industry?
No, I'm not actually. I'd love to know more about that.
Well, it ties in very much to what you were just saying. It's basically using food or food and drink or culinary culture for cross-cultural understanding. And I've always said that we should lock the world's leaders in a hotel banquet room and ply them with plenty of food and drink and come out a week later and they'd either kill themselves or we'd have world peace. So
yeah, well, definitely food is a huge part of our culture, our identity, and that's why talking about what we eat is just such an important and wonderful thing.
Now, you run World Vegan Travel as well. So really, you are kind of a gastro diplomat where you're going around the world with your vegan clients. And I imagine you probably come across some situations that either they didn't know that you were a vegan group or they just assumed that chicken stock and the risotto would be okay. And you're there to kind of spread the word about veganism and the benefits to society. How do you handle situations like that where they maybe were not as prepared as they should have been for your group?
Well, over my 14 years of being vegan, I've learned that communication is key. And whenever we decide that we are going to go to a particular destination with our group tours, let's say, for example, Alsace in France, which is traditionally a very meat-heavy, dairy-heavy part of the world, like before we even go there with our group, even before we choose the hotel that we're going to go to, we have a conversation with the hotel manager or the GM, and we say, look, your hotel, we're shortlisting your hotel. We would really love to come and bring 25 people to your hotel and stay a week and have all breakfasts and mostly dinners at your hotel. But we would want everything to be vegan, and it should be of a similar standard and quality and variety as your non-vegan breakfast buffets, for example. Is that something that you are interested in working towards? And you should know there's going to be a little bit of a learning curve and a little bit of trial and error. And of course, we're there to support you doing that. Is this something that you would like to do? And we've actually never had a hotel say no at that point, to be honest. We've never had a hotel say no, and they usually are excited about the opportunity. It never gets to the point where we actually arrive at the place and they make a mistake. I mean, there might be a tiny thing, but usually, generally speaking, there's been enough prep work done beforehand for everything to go, 98% smoothly. So preparation is key.
Well, that's a very smooth way to make sure that you make an impression upon the hotel or the restaurant, because I'm not sure I would be so understanding. I would probably say, what the hell are these bacon bits doing on my salad?
Right. Well, when you've been vegan for a long time, you kind of know the pitfalls to watch out for and what to expect. And being kind is an important part of being vegan too.
Yeah. Now, have you taken your clients to countries that are kind of traditionally meat-centric? And I'm thinking the Middle East, Spain, Argentina, parts of Africa. Have you been to any of those countries as a vegan successfully?
Personally speaking, I have been to quite a few places. I've not set foot in South America, but I have been to Spain. I have been to several parts of Africa, and we've taken our travelers to some very meat-heavy destinations. As I mentioned, the east of France, staying in rural Alsace, and also Rwanda as well, Central Africa. Definitely, we have taken our travelers to some non-vegan friendly places where the traditional cuisine isn't particularly vegan friendly, like we veganized it, but it's not traditionally vegan friendly. This is one reason why our travelers like to come on our trips, because they get to sample the local cuisine and culture, the culinary traditions, but made vegan, of course.
Now, when we were talking before the show, Brighde, you were telling me about some vegan hotels in Spain.
There's no sort of official regulations on this. It really is up to the hotel to how they label themselves. But generally speaking, most vegan hotels will take it all the way, let's say. So that means making sure that there's no animal products throughout the hotel, like I'm talking like leather or silk or wool blankets, for example. They also make sure that the cosmetics, the toiletries are not tested on animals, and that there's no animals used in entertainment on the hotel grounds, for example. So most will, but, like I said, there's no regulations. So it's generally up to the hotel.
Sure. Well, those are some very good points. I'm not sure I would have anticipated the wool blankets, for example. Very good point.
Yeah, feather pillows is another one as well. That's often used in some hotels. And for example, when we go to hotels and we have the opportunity to switch them out, we do, not because it's more comfortable or anything like that. We're just really wanting to send a message to the hotel that, we don't want to have these feather pillows in the room.
Well, and I also see that you call yourselves a luxury vegan travel company. So explain how the luxury can be applied to the vegan travel. Like, what does that mean to you and your company?
Way back in 2014, my partner, Seb, discovered travel hacking, which I'm sure many listeners will know about. It's when you collect points on your credit card and you can redeem it for travel experiences, hotels, and what have you. And for the first time, we got to stay, because he was very good at it, we got to stay at some incredible hotels and places around the world. And as a result, it came with a little bit of frustration, because we realized that the experience for us, even though we weren't actually paying for it, but we could just kind of observe that the experience for us was very, very different to the experience that other travelers would have. For example, there was very few options on the included breakfast buffet, for example, or the service that would just be standard for non-vegans, the ordering at the restaurant would just be an easy experience. It just would become like more challenging. I would have to explain, okay, we're vegan, so I don't see there's anything on the menu. Do you even know what vegan is, for example? And then, I would explain to the wait staff kindly, and they would report back to the chef. And then there would just be this back and forward between us and the chef. And finally, we might get something. And then I'd look at it and I'd be like, okay, so I'm paying the same amount for this, that person for this tomato pasta, that this person over there is paying for a very expensive steak, for example. Anyway, so we sort of had all of these experiences, and my partner and I, we have a background in travel, and we decided that why not try to recreate the 5-star experience for vegans? So that basically means going and staying in very, very nice places and having that experience of being really looked after, like you get in a luxury experience, but you don't have to explain yourself. You're traveling with like-minded people. The food that is served to you is very, very carefully created and designed. And just generally speaking, it's like a 5-star experience for vegans.
Okay, well, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that you're probably coming across a lot of these chefs or hotels that are maybe realizing that there's more and more vegan travelers than ever. Is that the case? Because from what we know at the association, that the interest in vegetarianism and veganism is growing rapidly.
The World Food Travel Association is the world's leading authority on food and beverage tourism. Founded in 2001, each year we serve a community of 200,000 professionals in more than 150 countries. Thinking about a career change because of the pandemic, or looking to improve your current skills? Consider our bespoke training and certification programs in culinary tourist guiding, culinary tour operations, restaurant and food service, and culinary destination marketing. Visit academy.worldfoodtravel.org to learn more and get started.
Things are changing. Things are definitely changing. For example, 10 years ago, going to France independently, there would just be not much available at all. And to go to a restaurant, a non-vegan restaurant, and there were not many at that point at all. And you would have to explain just what vegan is. Now, veganism is generally fairly well understood in France. So that hurdle is out of the way. There might not necessarily be some creative options on the menu, but at least they know what it is. That's an important start.
Are you doing anything to help educate the industry about the benefits of a vegan diet?
Well, I will say that from our business's perspective, we do a little bit, but of course we're only doing things on a very sort of small basis. We only have a few departures a year, and we just have, we go to one new country every year. However, I will say that me and some other vegan travel professionals in the vegan travel space, we're actually in the process of creating a vegan travel association. And one of the really exciting parts of that is that we're hoping to create some programs and create some incentives for non-vegan hotels and vegan travel providers to improve and get educated in this area. We're still in the early stages of that. I don't think you'll see any evidence of any programs for quite some time yet, but that's a goal of ours.
I like it. And, you made a point earlier that when we were talking before the show that even non-vegans don't want to eat meat every meal. That is so true. I mean, I'm a flexitarian myself, and I just noticed that as I have been getting older, my body naturally doesn't want to eat as much meat as I did when I was younger. It's just my body telling me that I'd rather have vegetables. And I've listened to my body. Sometimes I'll go to a restaurant and I'll wonder, I'll behave like a vegan. I wonder why everything on the menu has meat in it, because there's so many wonderful dishes that meat eaters would love if they were simply vegetarian. A vegetable moussaka, for example.
I agree with you, Eric. Yeah. I mean, when we think about it, when we travel and we stay in a hotel, for example, and there's just animal products every single meal, and a person like yourself who chooses to abstain from eating animal products for, let's say, 1, maybe 2 meals a day, They go to this nice hotel and they can't escape it. They're the only choices available to them. And so many people have quite severe and chronic health conditions that travel, whether it's diabetes or cancer or heart disease. It's really important for these people to be decreasing their consumption of animal products. And when they go to a all-inclusive resort, for example, they don't have a lot of interesting choices. And it's really hard to turn your nose up at these delicious animal product laden dishes when the only alternatives are a green salad. It would just be so wonderful if there could be some really tasty, delicious, but healthy vegan options for this segment of the population too.
Hey, you must have a pet peeve in business or life. What is it?
This is kind of a funny one, and I guess it doesn't really matter, but it's a pet peeve, and I guess that's what a pet peeve is about. It's like a little thing that irritates us that most people, it doesn't worry. But I moved to Canada a couple of years ago from Thailand, and I've lived in quite a few countries around the world, and I was just very, very surprised at the service that happens in North America. Of course, there is a very big culture around tipping, and I'm kind of okay with the tipping, but just constantly sort of checking in with the diners to make sure that they have everything and everything is okay. And I think this is an important part of service, but I have noticed that very often wait staff will actually interrupt diners in what they're saying and with their conversations to ask something that really isn't that important to ask. Is everything is okay? Can I refill your water that is not actually empty? These kinds of things. And, I have a pet peeve about being interrupted anyway, so I guess I'm just particularly sensitive to it. But I do feel like in North America, this could be something that could be worked on, because you don't necessarily know what those conversations are about. And just to be interrupted 4 or 5 times throughout a meal is a little bit of a pet peeve of mine.
That's interesting. I hear what you're saying. I would say I'm not as sensitive to you, but the one thing that I've really noticed is when you join someone for a meal and maybe you haven't seen them for a while and you just want to catch up, right? And you want to just download really quick or just have 5 or 10 minutes to yourselves. And they come over to take your drink order and they come over to take your food order when you're clearly engrossed in the conversation, and it can wait. If we want a drink, we'll let you know. We'll call you over.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I have experienced that. And I guess they're trained to make sure that you are feeling attended to, but I think some common sense could go a long way there too.
I know what you're saying, but I sometimes find just standing by the side of the table and waiting just until the sentence is over, or there is a break in the conversation, or just giving the diners a chance to notice that there's someone there. And of course, we're not going to make them stand there indefinitely, or certainly I wouldn't either, but just waiting until there's a natural break in the conversation and then see what they want.
And I bet if you talked to the server and asked them if they realized that they were interrupting you, it wouldn't even occur to them, I would imagine.
I know. I've often wondered whether I should kindly give that feedback, but I just feel that it might not be received well. So I never talk about it. I don't know whether that's the right or wrong way to think, but very often I just never say anything.
I know, because I think as people who dine out frequently, or at least we used to before things went sideways the past couple of years, but I think we're in positions to really influence how restaurants do things, right? How servers behave and how guests are treated and all of that. I think that we are probably more keenly attuned to this experience than a lot of other people. But you're right. I don't know that anyone really wants that feedback.
Right. Yeah. I don't know how to give it. If anyone has any good ideas, let me know.
Yeah, I'd like to know that too, because I think that, and it's funny because you talk to people and they always talk about service and how we need to do hospitality training and stuff. And there are all these programs. but I don't, God, yeah, it's almost like how to behave in a social situation. It's not even really restaurant service or food service. It's really more about interpersonal communications and behavior.
Exactly. I agree.
Wow, we learned something today. That was really deep. What was your eureka moment as a professional? When did it all just kind of gel for you?
We set up our business in 2017, and I quit my day job in 2019, and I started working on marketing full time. And as somebody who had never done marketing at all, it was and continues to be a learning curve. And as someone, and this might surprise listeners, knowing that I run vegan group tours, I'm actually a little bit of an introvert, and I always found the traditional concept of networking kind of cringy, I will say. The idea of sort of going into a room and then sort of promoting oneself and talking with people and handing over business cards, that really felt very unnatural to me. I don't think I'm alone in that feeling. Obviously, over time, I am better at those kinds of things. But when a friend of mine suggested that I should start my own podcast, I thought that this could be a good idea, marketing and getting backlinks and be giving value to potential travelers and giving value to vegans. I thought that that would be a really good reason, but I didn't really understand just how great it was for networking. Just the fact that podcasting, just like we're doing now, really creates a fantastic opportunity to have a conversation with somebody in a really lovely setting where it's a very, very focused discussion. And I've been introduced to other people from my podcast guests, and I've introduced my podcast guests to other people. For example, I just connected one of my podcast guests who is a vegan fiction publisher, and I connected her with a vegan nonfiction publisher, and they didn't even know that the other one existed, even though they are in very similar but not the same spaces. So podcasting has just been wonderful for that. I really, really appreciate it. And I get to speak with incredible people just like you and the work that you're doing.
Tell us the name of your podcast, and also where can people find it? What networks is it on?
It's pretty much on all of the directories, I think, but it's called the Well Vegan Travel Podcast, just like our company. And we just talk about travel from a vegan perspective. And that's not to say that everything is about vegan travel specifically, but we are just vegans talking about travel. So really that's all it is. So for example, we might have interviews with vegan hotel owners. We might talk about really great things that vegans might like to go and do when they go to Madrid, for example, and they're not necessarily specific vegan things, like staying in a particular vegan hotel in Madrid, for example. But it definitely would not include going and tasting a non-vegan delicacy in Madrid, for example. So these are the kinds of things that we talk about, and it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
You wouldn't be talking about the Spanish jamón in Madrid.
We would not, no. We certainly wouldn't be talking about how delicious it is. We might mention it, but we wouldn't be talking about how amazing it is, that's for sure. So it's kind of a safe place for vegans to go and listen and hear about travel. They can go and get some tips and tricks for their next adventure.
How many episodes have you broadcast?
I think we've had about 60 now. I think I should know that off the top of my head, but I have a very firm commitment at the moment that I want to release weekly episodes for 6 months. And I think we're on episode 18 of the 4th season now. So I'm really excited that we are getting and achieving that goal. And consistency is key, I'm learning.
Consistency is good. Yeah, we try to publish once a month. Sometimes it doesn't always go to that schedule, but I think monthly it seems to be a good frequency for our audience.
Yeah, it could be that maybe less often is good for our audience. I don't know, but I'm just being consistent with once a week for 6 months and just seeing what happens.
That's all you can do. Yeah. So now you're living in Canada. How did you end up choosing to live in Canada? And you're living in a beautiful part of it in British Columbia there. It's just a stunning province.
You are right. It's just wonderful. Okay. So I have to kind of take you back a little bit. So my partner and I, Seb, we've lived in many different countries around the world. And I mentioned that I had a day job before we moved to work on Well Vegan Travel full time. And I was actually working in international school teaching, and I was living in Bangkok. And after we finished living in Bangkok, obviously we didn't have work visas anymore. And we had to make a few decisions. What were we going to do next? And this was back in January 2020. And we went and stayed in a nice little resort. And we like, right, okay, we've got to figure this out. We had 3 candidates. The first candidate was to stay in Thailand. And the second candidate was to move to France, a country that both Seb and I really love. My partner, Seb, is French Canadian. So French is his first language. I speak French too. And I've lived there before as well. And the third choice was Canada. And we just did this big cost benefits analysis, and we weighted every pro, we weighted every con, and Canada won for a couple of main reasons. First of all, Seb's, my partner's family is here, and they're getting a little bit older, so it's really nice to be close by. And actually, we live in the same building as our in-laws now. And another really big factor that we didn't really know for sure at the time, but has turned out really nicely, is that Canada is quite business friendly. So we did actually go down the road of trying to figure out what would be required to set up a travel business in France as non-French permanent residents, let's say. And it was quite complicated. So it was quite lucky, actually, that we had weighted Canada so well as being quite business friendly. And yes, of course, there are a lot of regulations and licensing and insurances that you have to get to go to Canada. And it was to set up a tourism business in Canada, a travel agency in Canada. Definitely they were, but they were quite clear. Not too expensive, a little bit laborious, but doable. So that's why we ended up here in Squamish, which is an absolutely beautiful little town, just 45 minutes off north of Vancouver. And right now I'm looking over the beautiful coastal mountains. It really is a magical place.
And you're on your way to Whistler too, on that road that you pass Squamish, right?
You know it. We are. Yep. Yeah. We have a ski pass every year, and we spend a couple of days a week on the slopes, and it is wonderful. And then in the summer, we have incredible hiking, and we've got the water. Squamish is located right at the beginning, at the innermost part of the southernmost fjord in the west coast. So we just have water and the mountains. It's really rather magical.
Yeah, it's a beautiful area. And I love Whistler because they've got some great restaurants there. And I'm not much of a skier myself, but I think it's a beautiful resort village, and the food is excellent. So, and all the BC wines, of course. So I'm happy. Other people can go skiing, and I'll just eat and drink while I'm there.
Absolutely. There is a lot of incredible restaurants over there, and some of them are also really vegan friendly as well. It's kind of nice.
Yeah. BC is a fantastic place. But you made a point of that it was not as easy to set up a company in France, so you did it in Canada.
Do you think it was the burdensome rules and regulations of France that ultimately drove you to set up the business in Canada?
I understand why there needs to be regulation, of course. And we actually paid a lawyer quite a lot of money, if I remember, when we were considering France as a possible destination, and what would the steps would be in our particular case, given that we were not French citizens or the right to remain forever. And even they were unable to really help us, and that was just alarm bells. So yeah, being able to do business in the language is extremely helpful, but I think just some countries are a little bit more business friendly than others, I would say.
Yeah, and I guess now we're going down the path of talking about business and efficiency and competitiveness, but when I think about how long it took us to set this up in Spain and your story in France, and even when I had a company in the UK, that was pretty straightforward. It took a little bit longer, maybe a couple weeks, but not years worth. And then you look at more business-friendly countries like Singapore, right? Or even Australia, where you can get stuff done. I mean, how can these European economies stay competitive?
I have no idea.
Yeah, I'm not an economist, so let's get off the topic of economics. Boring. Hey, let's talk about food. Brighde, tell me something remarkable about you.
Something remarkable about me. Okay, well, I would never say that I'm extremely remarkable at all, but I guess I have lived in quite a few different places. When I was 17, 18 years old, my family and I decided to emigrate to Australia. And I thought that's where I was going to be based for the rest of my life, I guess. But that was not the case. In fact, as soon as I graduated from university, I started traveling. So first of all, I went to France and I worked as an English language assistant in a school. I trained as a teacher in my university during my university days. So I trained as a teacher. I went to France, and then the idea was I was going to come back to Australia and then settle down. Didn't happen. And I got a job as a tour leader for a travel company. And I worked with them, Intrepid. I'm sure some of your listeners will, and you will know about Intrepid. Yes. I worked as a tour leader for them for several years in Southeast Asia and France and Morocco. I was part of the team that set up France and Morocco. And then I met my partner, Seb, in Morocco. He was another tour leader. We lived in Vietnam, and then I got into international school teaching. I went from Vietnam to Thailand, and then from Thailand to Indonesia teaching, and then Thailand for a while. I became vegan in Vietnam, and I took all of that really on board. And it was, really my passion. I did a lot of activism. I really worked hard on my communication skills. And all of that together has really sort of culminated in setting up World Vegan Travel with my partner. So I guess that's kind of remarkable. I don't know, but it's maybe interesting. Living in lots of different places really does shape the way that you view the world.
You are the person you are today. You're the sum of all your experiences.
I would say that. Well put, Eric. Thank you.
And you would not have had the vision or the idea to set up World Vegan Travel if you hadn't done the things you had done.
Exactly, for sure. And obviously being vegan is a huge part of that. I never would have realized that there was what vegan is, and that there was this possible niche market that might be interested in doing this style of travel.
Brighde, we need to wrap up soon, but can you tell me, is there a quote that you're known for, or maybe you have a quote from someone else that you really love?
A quote that had a profound impact on me, and is this quite a famous quote by Marie Forleo. I'm not a huge follower of what she does, but this did resonate with me, and I did read her book, like Everything is Figure Outable. This idea that no matter what the problem is, there's usually a way to figure it out. And this was getting a little bit personal, a little bit deep here. Is I definitely was somebody that struggled with a fixed mindset. From the moment I was a child, I believed that you were either good at something or you weren't. And why I couldn't do this particular thing was because I didn't have the talent to do it, rather than understanding this really rather simple concept that if you practice something, you get better at it, and that no one is really very good at something straight away. And I sort of really explored these ideas in my first few years of teaching, where the work of Carol Dweck and growth mindset and the power of yet came out. So definitely that was a big impact as well. And definitely Marie Forleo, like just this idea that absolutely everything is figure outable. So I would say that quote is something that I always try to keep in mind, because I do have a tendency of feeling very defeated when a problem presents itself. And of course, life presents many problems to us. And I think my quote that I'm most known for is like, talk amongst yourselves. And usually this is because like the conversation has moved to a place where I have this amazing resource and tool that I just have to find and share with somebody. I would say that I'm somebody that has a lot of resources and has a lot of tips and tricks or hacks. I don't necessarily always like to call them hacks, but these sort of ways of doing things. And very often, like, the conversation will come to like a particular problem, like, oh my God, you just have to listen or to read this resource. I'm going to find it right now. Talk amongst yourselves while I find it, and then I'm going to email it to you straight away, and maybe it's useful for you. I definitely am known for that. In fact, when I left my teaching job at the school, when somebody did a little speech about farewelling me, which was very nice, that was one of the things that they mentioned.
I agree with you 100% that everything is figure outable. I think that sometimes when something goes wrong, people just sit there and think, well, that's how it is. I never look at it like that. I always look at it like, okay, well, now this is a challenge to solve. There is a solution. Just like Marie Forleo said, everything is figure outable. You just have to sit down and figure it out.
Exactly. Unlike you, this sort of problem-solving mentality doesn't always come easily to me. I have to really remember that quote and really remember that it is possible to get through these problems. So I'm so happy that you've mastered that. I'm still working on it.
Well, I don't know if I've mastered it, but I think I may be a little bit older than you and something I've learned in life. Yeah, it's definitely never take no for an answer and always look at the bright side of things. In fact, even during the pandemic, when everybody was panicking, and rightly so, it was a bad time for everyone, but I was waiting to see what we could say was positive, the positive outcomes from the pandemic, and things like going back to our culinary cultures, or people, especially younger people, learning or remembering how to cook at home, those types of things, or the rediscovery of local markets and local produce and so on, as opposed to the big supermarket chains. And those, I think, were some of the positive things. So it's a different way of looking at things, I guess.
Exactly. I remember during the pandemic when we couldn't travel, we couldn't run tours, and nor could our audience, our former travelers, we started really exploring a lot of armchair possibilities. We wrote some really informative blog posts on armchair travel. We really scraped the internet to find some really creative ways that we could travel without leaving home. And some really interesting things popped up. There's now this whole virtual tours thing going on where you can go and explore the world through your computer, and a licensed tour guide will show you around the Vatican, for example, and you just tip a little bit of money. I mean, it's such a cool idea. And whether it's cooking classes at home or online cooking classes or just reading books, books are a passport to and a free ticket to another country. There's so many opportunities for sure.
That's a great quote. Books are a passport to another country and another opportunity. Remember that. That's going to be your new quote, okay?
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I actually think I invented that one myself. That's exciting.
I love it. Well, Brighde, it has been an absolute pleasure chatting with you. I really respect everything you're doing with vegan travel. And like I said, I'm trending in that direction more myself, but I'm certainly aware of some of the things that you face as a tour leader, as a tour operator. And I think that you've also shared some of the things that have been important in my life as well, where I've lived in many countries too. And so I think that we're definitely aligned there. And it was lovely to hear your recounting of living in places like Thailand and Indonesia and Australia, the different things you've learned, the journeys you've been on, and how you've arrived at where you are in life right now. So thanks so much for taking the time to share your journey with our listeners.
Oh, thank you, Eric. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on. And if any listeners would like to reach out and have a conversation about vegan travel, I would love to have that.
Well, we'll post the link to your website in the podcast as well. So they'll be able to contact you there or from your LinkedIn profile too.
Thank you so much. Have a lovely day.
That's it for this episode of the Eat Well, Travel Better podcast. This episode is brought to you by the World Food Travel Association. The World Food Travel Association is the world's leading authority on food and beverage tourism. Founded in 2001, each year we serve a community of 200,000 professionals in more than 150 countries. Thinking about a career change because of the pandemic, or looking to improve your current skills? Consider our bespoke training and certification programs in culinary tourist guiding, culinary tour operations, restaurant and food service, and culinary destination marketing. Visit academy.worldfoodtravel.org to learn more and get started. Finally, we'd like to hear from you regarding the podcast. We invite you to share your ideas, questions, and thoughts by emailing us at help@worldfoodtravel.org, or you can connect with us and comment about the episode on major social media platforms. Special thanks to our guest, Brighde Reed, and thanks to you for joining us. I'm Eric Wolf, wishing you a safe, happy, and productive month ahead.